Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name's Rebecca, I'm 44 years old and I'm somebody who used to suffer from multiple sclerosis, who no longer experiences any of the symptoms since starting the carnivore diet nearly 2 years ago. In today's video, I wanted to discuss something that's been bugging me for a little while, and that is the fact that based on the comments that I receive on my videos, it seems to be that not everybody is experiencing the same results as I have on the carnivore diet. Now, I saw an immediate upturn in my health, like within weeks of starting the diet. There was a brief adjustment period, but after that, I saw noticeable changes that were obvious to other people around me as well. And those changes have continued to develop as I've continued on the diet. And of course, that's been wonderful and it's been life-changing, and all I've wanted to do is spread the happy news that this diet worked for me as somebody with multiple sclerosis who was really held back by my symptoms. But when I get comments like that it hasn't worked for me, what can I do? I don't know what to say. That's partly because I'm not medically trained, and although having said that, even if I was medically trained, I would not be trained in diet and nutrition because that's not part of mainstream traditional allopathic medicine. But also there's a lot of medical training which is downright wrong, based on assumptions that are wrong and that are profit-based. So even if I was medically trained, I don't think I'd be in a position to help. Also, I don't know the specifics of every individual case. I'm not in a position where I can make an informed assessment of why the diet's worked for me and it hasn't worked for you. All I can do is talk about my case and put the information out there and point you to other channels such as Dave Mack's channel that are collating other testimonials similar to mine. But it does play on my mind. I'm interested as well as to why the diet might work for some better than it works for others. Because as a carnivore, as part of the carnivore community, we tend to believe that this diet is the appropriate human diet. So based on that belief, why isn't it working for everybody? Why isn't it clearing up everybody's health problems? And I mean, the first thing that I would say is that just because you're eating the appropriate human diet, it doesn't mean that you're never going to get sick, you're never going to get injured, you're not going to die. We're not superhuman because we're eating the appropriate diet. We're just putting ourselves in a better position to be healthy. So like, for example, I've currently got a foot injury. I have got a ligament inflammation. I thought I might have had a broken like a minor fracture, like a stress fracture, metatarsal or whatever it's called, stress fracture in my foot at first. And I put a short up when I was waiting for an x-ray in the hospital, and somebody commented, carnivores don't get fractures, minor bruising at most. And they were joking, but it's, we're not carnivores aren't exempt from things happening to them. Our bodies are mortal, our bodies do get sick, our bodies do get injured. So the appropriate diet is only the first, building block of metabolic health and wellness and strength. So that's the first thing I would say. But I also think that, we've got to bear in mind that we all start from a different place on the diet. Not everybody has the same baseline. It depends on your age, it depends on your gender, it depends on your pre-existing conditions, your comorbidities, the diet you've been used to eating for most of your life, the medication you're taking, lifestyle factors beyond the diet, such as where you live, chemicals, pollution, stress that you're under. So every single human is an individual and in a particular situation. So that's something to bear in mind. I've been extremely lucky to see results the way I have. And maybe that's because I'd already taken the steps of putting myself into a better environment and reducing my stress, so that I'd already come some way towards overcoming MS. I was far from having overcome it, and the diet is what made the most obvious difference in my health, both cognitive and physical. But I was some way already along this journey to taking control of my health, and I remain convinced that there's lots beyond diet that we still need to address. So your results are going to depend on things like your current metabolic health, your gut health and microbiome, genetics and ancestry, your hormonal status. There's lots of things that make each individual unique that may affect how well the diet's going to help you. Another thing to say is that there's not one single carnivore diet. Some people, possibly most famously, Michaela Peterson, does the lion diet, and she's overcome a whole load of different physical conditions. She's absolutely amazing. She's only eating meat, salt, and water. But others, they include eggs, dairy, spices and condiments, coffee, tea. Some even include low-carb vegetables like avocado or mushrooms. Okay, mushrooms aren't vegetables, but I've myself have experimented with different variety within the diet. I've kind of fluctuated between variety and less variety, and I've been sort of trying to pay attention to my body as I've done that. I enjoy variety in my diet. I would be sad to cut out dairy, and I would struggle to cut out caffeine, but I've kind of settled on, at the moment, just a high-fat, straightforward menu that I did feature in a recent video. I've toyed with the idea of the lion diet. I think I'm happy with just switching between fish and different types of meat for my variety, and I don't want to cut out dairy, even though I've heard that that's quite bad for MS. But I've seen these results even though I have included dairy, so it's very difficult to say that it's a one size fits all. Then you've got intermittent fasting, so some people will adhere to much longer fasting periods. Some, like myself, do the 16-8 fasting regimen. Sometimes I haven't stuck to that, sometimes I have stuck more strictly to that, and I've seen how my body benefits when I do it, and how when I've fluctuated from that I feel a bit more sluggish. So there's a little bit of experimentation to see how your body responds to the diet, even when you have had these wonderful changes. So that's the other thing to bear in mind, that the carnivore diet, there is variation within it. There are different ways of following the diet. There's different levels of strictness which you could experiment with. So as I mentioned before, environment and lifestyle also matter, I strongly believe, as part of anybody's healing journey, whether that's from a chronic illness or from an injury or from trauma or whatever it might be, or a combination of all three. There's a lot of cultural factors, environmental factors that will determine how the diet plays out in everyday life. So what food can you access? What's the climate like in the area that you live? How sedentary is your lifestyle? How much screen time are you getting? Is it too much? Are you sleeping enough? Are you getting enough sunshine? Are you constantly stressed? Carnivore might help to reduce inflammation. I think inflammation is a huge factor in any unwell body, in any chronically ill body. But if you're burning out on 4 hours sleep and you're eating fast food, you're not going to fix everything like that. You know, you've got to pay attention to these different aspects of the way in which you carry your body, your relationship with your body. And then there's elements of mindset and psychology that perhaps come into play. I personally love the simplicity of carnivore. I love that there's no decision fatigue around what am I going to cook for dinner, what am I going to buy at the supermarket, how am I going to plan my meals. I know exactly what I'm going to buy when I go to the supermarket every day. I don't waste time worrying about what I'm going to cook, how I'm going to cook it. It's the same thing every day, and it's super easy. I love that, even though, you know, the trade-off to that is variety. There's less of a artistry around cooking, but I don't mind that trade-off. Other people may find it more difficult. And then there's cravings and emotional eating, which can be a massive thing for people these days, I think. You know, I found that my sugar cravings, which I have experienced since I started the diet changes your body. It does take away your sugar addiction. But every now and again, I've had sugar cravings and I have caved in, and I've felt the impact of that on my system. I've broken out in eczema, energy crashes, things like that. But what I found recently is that, see, I'd always been adding soya milk to my tea all the way through the 2 years that I've been on the diet. That was just a force of habit. I had become lactose intolerant before I got sick with MS. Just before I got sick, I realized that I'd become lactose intolerant, and my stomach was like gurgling really loudly when I would drink a cup of tea with milk in it. And it was embarrassing because I was studying in a university at the time, and I would be in seminars and lectures, and my stomach would just be like in a quiet lecture hall, like making this huge gurgling noise. And I realized that I'd become lactose intolerant. So I switched to soya milk, and that helped. And so I was already drinking soya milk when I when I got MS, and then further down the line when I switched to carnivore, I had got used to the taste. It is an acquired taste, but I had acquired it. And so I didn't want to cut that out. I'd kind of gone off the taste of milk and tea, even though that was more carnivore than my habit. So I just carried on. I thought it's only a small amount. But recently I've switched to cream in my tea. I just decided to try it, and now I am 100% addicted to tea with double cream in it. It's my new guilty pleasure that isn't even guilty because it's part of the carnivore diet. Okay, maybe the caffeine I could reduce, but the cream, oh my God. And I have found that, I don't know if it's the elimination of the soy or the fact that that's up to my fat intake. I am free of sugar cravings at the moment since I discovered this. I'm drinking probably more tea than I should because it's so delicious. But I haven't thought about breaking the diet or broken the diet since I switched to cream in my tea. Anyway, that's a side issue. Emotional eating, you know, that's a huge thing in this day and age. That's a mindset thing. So if you're battling with that, you might find the carnivore diet difficult because it doesn't lend itself to that way of eating. There's a kind of primeval fuel relationship with food on the carnivore diet, not sitting around in front of Netflix munching, you know, that it's completely not compatible with that, which is, I think, a fantastic thing. But you might need to find something else to replace your emotional eating with in order to succeed on the diet. Some people find it kind of mentally exhausting if you struggle with the animal welfare issue. I don't actually struggle with that, although I'm a massive animal lover. I just think if anything, it's increased my respect for animals and my desire for them to be treated well when they are alive and, you know, be given an ethical death that's full of respect. But some other people may struggle to the point where they can't continue on the diet with that issue. It can be socially isolating because it's an extreme diet, and, you know, there's a lot of social rituals around eating, and eating is a very communal affair often, and so it can potentially be isolating, and it might clash with cultural dishes, and then it might feel restrictive rather than empowering. So if that's your mindset, you might struggle with it. Also, if your mindset's like all or nothing, this diet will fix everything that's wrong with me, you're possibly setting yourself up for burnout and for disappointment, because the truth is that healing is, you know, rarely a linear process, and no diet, including carnivore, is going to work exactly the same for everyone and at exactly the same rate. So in summary, I don't think that the carnivore diet actually is a miracle. I think it's a tool. It's a foundational building block for human health. Whether it helps or hinders is going to depend on your unique biology, habits, environment, and your mindset. And I think that's why it's really important to approach any diet with like a mindset of curiosity rather than dogma, and pay attention to your body and pay attention to factors beyond the diet. Take it from your baseline. You know, it might be that your baseline is that much further advanced into your illness or your unhealthy diet or whatever it might be, and it's just going to take that little bit longer to start seeing those benefits. If indeed you experience them, nobody can say, I can't say that I'm cured of my MS. I've just reverse the symptoms, overcome the symptoms, but I'm not in a position to say that I'm cured, and at any point it could come back. So I think, you know, start where you're at, start with your baseline and track how you're feeling, and develop an honest relationship with yourself, your body and your habits, and adjust it where necessary. Try to build something that's sustainable for you. There are so many variables, but you know yourself best, and what works for one person may not work for the next person, and that's not because the diet is bad. It's because each person is unique. So let me know what you think about these points that I've raised. Why do you think the carnivore diet may work better for some people than it does for others? I look forward to reading your comments, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.